UEFA Europa League is back for Rangers. Aston Villa are the holders. I can exclusively reveal, I can exclusively predict and get down the bookies and back this one, troops. Aston Villa will not retain the Europa League this season. No, they will not retain the Europa League. The Villa Diamandi, he's going to go for 100 million. I'm seeing 110 million, up to 112 million. Take the money now. Take the money. It's no it's not that Diamante, it's different Diamante, different. But we should take if we get an offer for Mo Diamante or Mo Diamante, we should maybe take a wee offer for him if it was round about the same, because we need a bit of a cash injection. Could we please sell Nico Raskin as soon as possible? How you doing, folks? This is your Fat Egg. Hibs, Hearts, and Motherwell are also involved in European qualifiers this week, but there's a Swede and a Belgian and a Finn and a Republic of Ireland Irishman and two Northern Irishmen managing clubs in the SPFL Premiership this season. What the hell happened to Brexit means Brexit? We'll get nothing to do with Europe anymore. It just all seems to be completely mixed up. Rangers back in the Europa League preview with added review of Friday night's events at Tannadice. Pod coming to you in association with Gersnet. Check out Gersnet every Friday 9 p.m, every Sunday 9:30 p.m. If the fixture schedule will allow for that. You get your preview pod usually on a Friday at 9 p.m. I know the boys had it, I think, on Thursday last week. Frankie had it, Gersnet, on the Thursday, because Rangers are playing on the Friday night. Let Celtic playing on Monday night there and stuff like that. It's not a day with Europe. We're getting messed about. All the SPFL Premiership fixtures were on live on Sky at the weekend. Was Falkirk versus St Mirren a 3 o'clock kickoff? I think it was a 3 o'clock. It's a 3 o'clock Saturday game, live on the telly. The Scottish. I never thought I'd see the day. Something's changed there. I've completely missed that announcement, but they're all on the telly. So Gersnet will, segue and it'll fit in with when Rangers are actually playing. But the standard routine for Gersnet is 9 p.m. on a Friday and 9:30 p.m. the flagship show live on the Gersnet YouTube channel. I'm sponsored by Gersnet, and I'm also sponsored by Nature Documentaries and athletics meetings that are on the telly. The two things on the telly that I would never think to sit down and watch. I would never schedule it. Oh, there's some maybe the Olympics, but there's an athletics meeting on, the Gold Cup or whatever they call it, Gold Diamonds meeting in Crystal Palace or something like that. Let's sit down and watch that. I never do it on purpose, but if you're flicking through the channels and then you come across it by accident, then you'll actually find it quite interesting. It's a bit like everybody's attitude to Rangers in European competition, apparently, just now this season. This is, and for a few seasons now, I've detected this attitude towards Rangers in European competition among the Rangers support. I mean, we all kind of tune in this season for the Breaking Bad or Sopranos of seeing Rangers lifting the SPFL Premiership title. But hey, if we happen to accidentally click on the remote in a way that we can leads to David Attenborough, accidentally leads to David Attenborough or Ron Pickering of a European run, then that'll be very, very pleasant distraction for half an hour or so. For me, our attitude to our European brilliance of the 2020s has been a bit like the male false garden praying mantis, but the female doesn't eat him after they've mated, eats them during they're having sex, they're copulating, and she's eating them at the same time. These nature documentaries, don't want to sit down to what, be thick on it. And it turns out she's actually eating. And I think that's the kind of attitude, like Celtic have been chewing our heads off. This is what's the other day. This green false garden, I think you get them in Australia, that kind of neck of the woods. It's a praying mantis, but it's a false garden praying mantis, and it's green. Maybe it brought this home. But it's chewing the head off. The female is actually chewing the skull, has bitten halfway through, has consumed half of the guy's skull. The male praying mantis, green false garden praying mantis, but he's still getting his end away. He's actually in the process of doing the business, and I think that's a bit like Celtic are chewing our heads off when it comes to the SPFL Premiership. But in Europe, we're still getting a wee bit of action there. We're still enjoying ourselves, and we're kind of bottom. We see it as been some. I always thought European competition was more cerebral. That was it, but at Rangers, we seem to regard Rangers supporters seem to regard that as a kind of one off the wrist sort of thing, doing well in Europe. It's really we want to be winning the SPFL Premiership. We want to be dominating domestically, or even more viciously than that. The way the US women's 4x100 metres relay team won the London 2012 Olympic gold, while also breaking the old East Germany world record. Totally merciless. That's the way we seem to be regarding club domestic competition versus European competition. Just no, actually, don't actually care about what we do in Europe. We want to win the league. That's the focus now under Derek McInnes. I'm going to work on this analogy here. So my name's Alec Anderson. Wherever you go, I will be. Carcass. Whatever you see, it will be. Rotting flesh, humanity recovered, glittering etiquette, answers her crimes with mausoleum rent. Regain your self-control and regain your self-esteem and blind your success and spies and analyze, despise and scrutinize, never knowing what you hope for and safe and warm, but life is so silent for the victims that have no speech and their shapeless guilty remorse obliterates your meaning, obliterates your meaning, obliterates your meaning, your meaning. Your meaning. No birds. No birds. The sky is swollen black. No birds. No birds. Holy mass of dead insects. We're going to Bialystok playing a red and yellow kit, which I'm sure a few of the Partick Thistle hipsters that live around me, they probably wear that to Fir Hills, this red and yellow kind of gaudy looking kit. It's never nice. It's not bad. Sometimes when Thistle put a bit of black in there, it looks quite smart. But it's more like, at times it's more like Galatasaray, and I'm sure a few Partick Thistle fans wear Galatasaray kits as well. Remember Galatasaray in the 90s, Manchester United going there in the Champions League, welcome to hell. Well, Bialystok actually is hell. Actually is hell. Oh, Mr. Bialystok, the producers. Why do Mel Brooks call him Mr. Bialystok? That character, Max Bialystok, and the producers, because Bialystok is exactly where his family hailed from. He's born in New York, obviously, but of good Jewish stock. Didn't he hail particularly from Bialystok, but that kind of general area, northeast Poland, Belarus, over to Ukraine. It's constant changes of empires and things like that. The political borders are changing all the time in that neck of the woods. But Mel Brooks is still on the go. Mel Brooks, 100 years old, unbelievable. But he's his family from that part of the world. And Bialystok, it was a centre of Jewish civilization in Europe. It was I don't know what the exact stat is. It's either the biggest Jewish population in any city in Europe, or it was the city that was most dominated by a Jewish population, the Jewish diaspora. It's always a diaspora for the Jews, isn't it? Up until after the Second World War. I'm assuming New York is right up until the Second World War was the place that had the most of everybody, the most Irish, the most whatever, the most Jews as well. But of course, Bialystok, it was half. I think the population around about 100,000, and half of it at the start of the Second World War anyway was Jewish. Before that, I think it'd been like up to 70-75% Jewish, Bialystok, and they'd had pogroms. It's not just about the Nazis, the locals, no, all parts of Europe, everywhere. There's all Ashkenazi Jews, I'd imagine, in that part of the world. They'd had plenty of pogroms and things in the 19th century, and there's always about 50 or 60 Jews getting killed overnight every decade or so in Bialystok by the locals. But then, of course, the Pact of Steel, the von Ribbentrop-Molotov, the treaty where the Soviet Union and the Germans were on the same side. The Soviet Union and Nazi Germany were on the same side at the start of the Second World War, just to kind of play off against each other. And invaded Finland. They invaded Poland. Of course, that's why we get involved in the war. But Poland, there was a technicality in which we got involved in the invasion of Poland. But at first, it was the Soviet Union that was occupying that. So in 1940, they had the Katyn massacre, were all over. I thought it was about 30,000 people, high-ups in the army, intellectuals, of course. You always got to get rid of the intellectuals, kind of left-leaning people as well. They've always got to get massacred. Policemen, kind of local officials, mayors and stuff like that. The Soviets just genocided all them. It's only about 30,000 or so. It's all over the country, and there was guys who played for the team, the FITBA team, Bialystok, whatever its name was at that point in time. It's been under like any club, any football club that's been part of the Soviet Union, a satellite state, part of the Warsaw Pact, under a communist regime in particular, or as in Belgium. There's been lots of mergers and years where it didn't play at all, and lots of name changes through the years. But they've been Jagiellonia Bialystok since about the 50s, I think, and they were also Jagiellonia Bialystok sometime before the war as well. But then the Soviets came in, and Jagiellonia, they were formed in 1920 by the 42nd Infantry Regiment Reserves in Poland, Third Lanark, what we're talking about here. And their name didn't have Jagiellonia in it for a while, but eventually Jagiellonia is a Polish dynasty, a kind of royals dynasty that they're a bit loyal to in that part of the world, coming from Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, something like that. And way back in the day, all the various empires in that part of the world that have taken over and then kind of dissipated all through the centuries. But Jagiellonia Bialystok, some of their players or whatever, or the 42nd Infantry Regiment had taken part in wars against the Soviets, against the Russians and all that, just before the Soviet Union got involved, come into the invaded place in the 1940s. So there's a wee bit of massacre there. And then once the Soviets kind of pull back because Operation Barbarossa and all that, the Germans have turned on the Soviet Union and they're invading the Soviet Union, the Soviets pull out and the locals have a go at the Jews and they kill, I don't know, a few hundred of them just between the changeover, and then the Nazis come in and there's no more Jews in Bialystok. There are no more Jews in Bialystok. The first night they got there, the Nazis, they put, reports vary, between 800 and 2,000 people in the synagogue, because it was like a cathedral-sized synagogue, a huge synagogue in Bialystok, and they burnt them alive. They burnt them all to death, killed them all, and there is now a fucking heritage trail in Bialystok. There's a heritage trail talking about its Jewish history. There's no Jews in Bialystok anymore. It used to have the biggest population, or per capita or whatever, of any city in Europe of Jews, and just murdered them all. I think Manjanik, the concentration, lesser known concentration camp, gets mentioned, of course, in that sample in the Holy Bible with the Manic Street Preachers, but it's nearby Manjanik, and also most of them go to Treblinka, Auschwitz, Birkenau. It's so many concentration, Kelmo, when it was, just trying to get things going at first. So many concentration camps really handy for the population of Bialystok. And of course, the people who survive there today don't necessarily, nothing to do with them, is it? Great-grandfathers and mothers and all that. It was the Nazis come in there, but they were certainly helped by a lot of the locals, and they were totally repressed for decades under the Soviet Union as well. The Poles, so don't have their own troubles to seek. But yeah, off they went to there's another night, I think it was a few months after the Nazis came in there, and the Wehrmacht and all that, was it 1943, I think they come in, 1942, 1943. They burnt down the synagogue, of which there is now a little square, and there's a little tiny memorial. If you look up Bialystok in Wikipedia, it will show you the little memorial. It's like a kind of bent bit of metal that represents the dome at the top of the synagogue, and there's a wee plaque there showing you what it used to look like. But there's another night where they took, another couple of nights where again they murdered about 2,000 people a night in the forest. They took them to the local forest. It's always forests, isn't it? It's always forests in Eastern Europe when it comes to massacring the Jews during the Second World War. So they killed about 2,000 of them a night there, and then they just started the actual kind of the ghetto. There's always a ghetto, and there was an uprising as well. And the Bialystok ghetto was the uprising, and then that lovely phrase, they liquidated the ghetto, as they would eventually do in Warsaw as well. They liquidated the ghetto, did the lovely old Nazis, that's your right-wing types. Away they went to took them all to whoever was remaining went off to the death camps, and most of them did indeed die. And about 70 miles from Bialystok itself is the birthplace of Raphael Lemkin, personal hero of mine. Raphael Lemkin who invented the word. He coined the phrase, he coined the word, he invented it, literally invented it. Genocide. He invented it because this is before the Second World War. He's trying to tell his family he learned it. It was when it was Belarus. It's really close to the border with Belarus, Bialystok in Poland, but it was part of, I don't know what Poland. This Rafał Lemkin, where he was born, Thelma. It's part of the same. The voivodeship, or whatever they call it, the county of Bialystok, and he would go into Bialystok itself and became a great lawyer, a genius of a man, and he's trying to tell his parents, you got to get out of here. History tells us anything. They will kill us. The Nazis are coming here. The Soviets are coming. They're going. The first people they're going to go for is the Jews. No. Don't be daft, son. Don't be daft. We make money here. We're part of the community. We're part of the economy. Why are they going to? It doesn't make any sense. They're trying to win a war. They don't have time to start massacring millions of folk. And he'd learned all about the various massacres, the pogroms, not just against the Jews, but all over the world at this point in time. And they wouldn't listen to him, and he left, and he went over to the States. He got out just in time, and his whole family were massacred in the Holocaust, and away he went. And if you watch Shoah, which is I always talk about cinema in this podcast of mine, I always talk about Heat, Back Godfather or With Neil and I or stuff like that, throw in some art house cinema, but Kozlowski, Kozlowski, the Three Colours trilogy. Nice Polish fella, great problem. I'm not trying to condemn the Poles here. We've all got scumbags in every country who would genocide everybody if they possibly could, anybody didn't like. But I'm always talking about cinema, but the greatest film ever made, the greatest movie. It's not a fictional movie. It's Claude Lanzmann's Shoah, which lasts between 6 and 8 hours, depending on what version you're watching. It's certainly the greatest piece of cinema, but the greatest bit of art I have ever seen in my entire life. And he goes to Poland. This is in the late 70s, various parts of Poland, near the concentration camps. And he interviews people who were there, who were young back in the day, but they remember it all. They remember it. Locals who were living in the houses that were vacated by their Jewish neighbours who they used to dislike because they had a bit too much money for their liking. Come on over here, taking our jobs. I think even though they'd been there for centuries. And they're just actually quite happy that they've got the hussies, no guilt whatsoever. I hate Bialystok. I hate everything it represents, and I hope we absolutely destroy them. I hope we destroy this team tomorrow, but I don't know that we will. So, Jagiellonia Bialystok that we're playing, they formed in 1920, as I say. They get into the top flight for the first time in their history in 1987. They get disbanded in the Second World War. Not a lot happening there, football-wise, and they weren't favoured when they started up again. After the Second World War, really struggled. See, lots of mergers, lots of years where they're not actually competing at all. But they were kind of third tier, second tier at best for the late 50s to 60s. And I think I was reading their history on Wikipedia, I think sometime in about the late 70s, somebody came in with a great youth programme and developed the youth. There's bound to be some money, some investment there as well, that suddenly kind of sprung up. But they got into the top flight. This is them celebrating their the 40th anniversary of them getting into top flight in Poland, the extra class, for the first time in their history. So we're 86, 87, we're celebrating 40 years of the Soonest Revolution. They're celebrating 40 years of being in the top flight at all in Poland. And the up and down, but it's probably 2000, it's probably another 20 years later, they get back into top flight in 2007, and that's when they start building to becoming the club that you probably have heard of, and it's a distinctive name, Jagiellonia Bialystok. I think they had a Scottish fella playing for them for a while as well, but I also used to find it quite amusing as well. Jagiellonia, they've got such a Partick Thistle kit to our eyes, but their name actually incorporates the word Jag, the Jags, the Jagiellonia Bialystok, but they've done up a stadium, and they've got a whole lot of top-notch by their own standards type players in there. They won the Polish Cup, their first ever major honour, in 2010, I'm sure it is, and that started them in the kind of European qualifying habit that hopefully it peaked a couple of seasons ago. They've still done quite well the past couple of seasons by their own standards, by Polish standards as well. But they won the extra class. They won the Polish top flight for the one and only, the first time and the only time so far in the history in 2024. They've been runners up in that a couple of times, runners up in the Polish Cup a couple of times as well, other than the two times, or the times that they've won both of them, the one time that they've won both of them. I think one of the Polish Cup final appearances was back in the late 80s, but generally it's been in the kind of 2010s, 2020s that Jagiellonia have become quite the force in Poland. They're up the top end of the league. They finished third in the Polish top flight last season. Lech Poznan beat them by, they finished 4 points ahead of them. They only get knocked out of the Champions League qualifiers into third place on goal difference from Gornik, our old pals, Gornik Zabrze. They finished second last season, just on goal difference ahead of Jagiellonia Bialystok. Third place, still very respectable for Jagiellonia compared to their history. They're second. They've only played 2 games in the Polish top flight so far, but they're second already, or just a goal behind, I think it's Legia Warsaw, who are top of the Polish league at this very early stage. Who bothers with league results after 1, even 2 games? They don't mean anything, do they? Jesus. So they're well placed again. They're looking quite good. Their top guy, you probably heard in the Rangers review, is a Spaniard called Jesus Imaz. He's been there since 2019. I think he's at Wisla Krakow before that. Played for very smaller clubs in Spain. He's going to be 36 next month, but he was the first Jagiellonia player to score a hat-trick in the Polish top flight. So he's a legend there. He's a goal scorer, playmaker. He's the guy to watch. He's the only guy I could actually name. I've not looked into their team too hard, I have to say to you, but I do know that they won the Polish Cup 2010, and they started coming to my attention probably at that point. And they did a couple of seasons qualifying for Europe, just straight out they qualified for Europe via winning the Polish Cup. But the first 2 seasons in Europe, they were getting put out in the first round, the very first game, their very first tie in Europe. And then they have about 3 seasons in a row where they get put out in their second tie in Europe, and then they win the 2024 of 3 seasons of European the 3 seasons where they qualified in Europe. After that, they would go out in the second tie that they played, and then when they win the title in 2024, they go out of the Champions League qualifiers. I think the second tie they play in the Champions League qualifiers the following season, and then they go out their first, the playoff round, it must have been, of the Europa League, and they drop into the newly formed Conference League, and they're one of the clubs that this new tertiary tournament suits perfectly. And they get they're also in the Conference League group stage last season. So the last 2 seasons they've played in the Conference League group stage, and both times have qualified from the group. And in that first season they get into it, season before last, they end up getting to the quarterfinals of the tournament, the quarterfinals of the Conference League, where they're put out by Real Betis, who of course got all the way to the final, which was in Poland, in the Wrocław, where it was Real Betis who lost 4-1, 3-1, 4-1. Oh, that's terrible. I can't remember. I think it might have been 4. Oh. They lost each other. They got humped by Chelsea anyway. Chelsea becoming the first club ever to win all 4 of the historic European competitions. And then last season, they get out the group stage, but the kind of knockout playoff round, post-group stage, this playoff round that's been introduced because of the new Swiss system in the group stages in European club competition. They played Fiorentina, who of course had been beaten finalists twice in a row in the Conference League, the second and third season of the Conference League. Losing one of them to West Ham. No, we're playing West Ham in that pre-season friendly. West Ham have actually played 3 European finals. Cup Winners' Cup, they won it in 65. They lost the final in 76 to Anderlecht, and they won the Conference League, the second Conference League final, 2023. That was they beat Fiorentina in the final of that, and Fiorentina then lost the final again the following season to Olympiacos in Greece. Quite unlucky for Fiorentina. They went out the semi-finals to Real Betis the season Jagiellonia got to the quarterfinals, and then last season they went out. They get picked out, but they lost to, I think, the quarterfinals last season that they lost, perhaps Fiorentina. But anyway, they played Jagiellonia Bialystok in the playoff rounds, and Fiorentina went to Bialystok and won 3-0 in Poland in the first leg. Tie over. No, they go back to Florence, and Bialystok, Jagiellonia win 3-0. It goes to extra time, and Fiorentina score a couple of goals. I think Jagiellonia get one back. No, because they won 4-2 on the night to Jagiellonia in Florence, but they go out like 5-4 on aggregate. Very, very unlucky. Fantastic field. So this is a Conference League side. This is a Conference League hardened side. A very, very ambitious club that we're up against. A very forward-going club. This, as we all know, is a far tougher tie, you would imagine, than playing Larn or Iberia Tbilisi in the playoff round it would get to. I don't like this. I don't like looking forward to who you be playing the next round. This is a really tough tie we've got in Europe this Thursday evening. If we were to lose, I mean, Iberia Tbilisi, fuck me. Sorry, tone down the language. Dinamo Tbilisi is one of the European finalist clubs that I've yet to see. I will always talk about this when I mention European competition. It's particularly pertinent just now when there's so many clubs potentially the Rangers could meet this season. You're right at the early stages. I'm looking at it like a big menu. There's 27 clubs that have reached a European club final that I have yet to see in the flesh. I've seen 82 of them. Saint Etienne was the last one I saw, just that friendly the other week. Gornik, I wasn't at the game where we played them in the 80s, in the 89 season. Gornik, Zaborshi, 87-88 season. I was not at that game, the one at Ibrox. It's unbelievable. So I was at the Dinamo Kiev game before it, and I was at the Stoy Bucharest game after it, but I wasn't at the game against Gornik. So 1969-70 Cup runners up, Gornik Zaborshi, the only Polish side ever to get to a European final. So they're still, I think they're in the Champions League qualifiers. They could drop in to the Europa League if we were to get through. We've also got Austria, Vienna, RB Salzburg, 20 on Skader, FC 20, and Freiburg, who lost last season's Europa League final. They're all there as potential opponents if we can progress into the group stage. They would all be scores off the list. I saw 3 European finals I haven't seen before in the course of the last year: Roma, Club Brugge, and Saint Etienne. So it'd be really nice to get a few more off the list. I want Rangers to progress for that reason, if nothing else. But if we were to, but it's Dinamo Tbilisi is one of the teams. Dinamo Tbilisi is one of the teams that, for years and years. They won the Cup Winners' Cup in '81, their only European final. And I've even seen Karl Zeiss-Jena, who they beat in the final. I saw them playing for Fortuna Düsseldorf in a regional Liga Nord. It was then before the German third division, the Bundesliga third division was set up. Jörg Alberts was playing for Fortuna Düsseldorf, but I went over there to see Karl Zeiss-Jena and Fortuna Düsseldorf, who'd lost the '79 Cup Winners' Cup final, getting them off the list. That was years ago. But yeah, I've never seen Dinamo Tbilisi, and they were winning like 3 or 4-1 for their first leg against a Lithuanian team, who then beat them like 7-2 in the away leg. But Iberia Tbilisi, that'd be a real slap in the face if it turns up we end up getting them in the next round. Drew 0-0 at Inver Park and Larne last night in the first leg of that one. But if we get beat, and it'd be a swap. If we lose this tie to Jagiellonia, they'll become a Europa League. They'll get a chance of becoming a Europa League group stage side, a total promotion for them. We would get a demotion from our Europa League norm and go into have a chance in the Conference League. We could still go to Europe. If we win this tie, we're guaranteed European club competition until at least December, depending on which group we're in. It would be January if we get into the Europa League. But I think it's still the 6 games, just, isn't it, in the Conference League? It just goes on till kind of late November, early December. But we would drop into, if we lose this tie, we drop into the Conference League playoff against Jablonec of Czechia, or RFS of Latvia, of Riga in Latvia. That again seems a more winnable tie, but far from it, given the way we seem to not want to do anything in Europe this season. Polish football for me is just the most kind of notable stuff was Gregor Krychowiak. Polish club football in Europe. As I say, Gornik Zaborshi, the only Polish side ever, the only once ever as a Polish side. And a bit like Czechia, in that respect, Czechia reached the Euro 96 final. There was a few Czechs in the Czechoslovakia team that won Euro 76. They reached a couple of World Cup finals, Czechoslovakia, in the 30s and the 60s, but they've never had a club in a European final. It's quite amazing. The Danes as well, they win Euro 92, but their clubs don't get to European finals. That kind of thing. The Poles are a bit like that as well. Fantastic record in the World Cup. No semi-finalists with their last 4, 2 or 3 times at least. The Poles, but the clubs just won. Gornik losing the 1970 Cup Winners', beating us en route and getting Davy White the sack, but they get to the final and they lose that to Manchester City. Manchester City's first European trophy back in 1970 season. It was in Vienna. That final was played in Vienna. Gornik losing it 2-1 in an empty Prater Stadium. It didn't have the roof and it was really pissing down. I'm talking far too much. It's European football. It gets me excited, but not as excited as you will find out is Rangers slipping up against Tannadice, against Dundee United at Tannadice under Derek McInnes. Anything else but the Poles? Gregor Krakowiak, he scores for Sevilla in the Warsaw Stadium. The final, there's been a few finals played lately in Poland. It's still, somebody my age, still the fall of the Berlin Wall, the fall of the Iron Curtain, really, it's ongoing. It doesn't matter how it happened when I was in my 20s, it's too late. I still can't help seeing it. It's a wee bit amazing, a wee bit interesting. Oh my God, the European club finals. So we had Chelsea against Real Betis, the Conference League final in Wrocław in 2025, and there was also 2021. Gdansk, wasn't it? It ended up, it was Manchester. We were in the Europa League that year. We were hoping to get to the final in Gdansk. And Gerrard scored in the final, but he scored for Villarreal. They drew with Manchester United on the night. And then the greatest penalty shootout of all time, where only David De Gea missed, the last guy to go out the 2 11s that were left on the park. He misses the penalty, and that's it. Villarreal have beaten Manchester United and won their first European trophy in their first final. That was in Gdansk, Lech Wałęsa, City of Gdansk, Solidarność. That's where the Poles eventually got a bit of a through that, before the fall of the Iron Curtain. But that's Polish football. Gregor Krakowiak comes in. He scores. It was the National Stadium 2015 in Warsaw, and he's playing for Sevilla. He only played for a Polish club right at the very end of his career. Over 100 caps for Poland. Krakowiak played 4 major tournaments for the Polish national team, but he scores Sevilla's first goal when they beat Dnipropetrovsk, who no longer exist, of the Ukraine in the 2015 Europa League final in Warsaw. Of all the places for him to score a goal. Ruslan Rotan, he scored one of the 2 goals. It was 3-2 to Sevilla. They were on 3 in a row. Sevilla eventually won the Europa League 3 in a row in that particular run. But he was the first guy, Rotan, to score a goal. He was Ukrainian. He scored for Dnipro in that final, and he was the first guy to score in the Europa League final. And there was only two European finals at that time, remember, from his own scored for a club from his own country in the Europa League final since 2 Russians that scored for Zenit St. Petersburg back in the old 2008 UEFA Cup final. I can't really remember. I mean, the following season, 2009, the last ever UEFA Cup final as such, it was Shakhtar Donetsk beating Werder Bremen 2-1 after extra time. All the goals are scored by Brazil. 3 different Brazilians are scoring the goals. It's actually became quite a rare thing. I mean, you had the likes of Thomas Muller scoring for Bayern in the Champions League final, and Frank Lampard scoring for Chelsea in 2008. It was actually happening more often. The Champions League final, guys were scoring for a club from their own country. The guys scoring from a club from their homeland. There's so many foreigners dominate at that. But that's the freedom of movement. That's what it's all about. So, my name is Alec Anderson. I did the mausoleum thing, the Mannix. My name's Alec Anderson, and I have got a brand new television. I was telling you the other night that I had to get rid of my old Samsung, got a new Samsung, a new telly, which makes everything look kind of brilliant. I watched a bit of Russell Crowe's Robin Hood. You know that Robin Hood that Russell Crowe was in? His terrible accent on that, playing Robin Hood. Who knew that was the greatest film of all time? Who knew that was the greatest film of all time? Never mind the art house cinema and the blockbusters were discussing. I didn't know that either until I watched it my brand new Samsung that's 10 inches wider or taller or whatever, 10 square inches bigger than the previous Samsung I had, and it's got the Ultra HD and HDR 4K to the power Kelvin. Although it looks like 3D. I know that you guys are all up to speed with your televisions and all that. You've got massive tellies and you've got all the tech. I'm a technophobe myself, struggles with this kind of stuff. But I'll be going to mates' houses and that, and family houses and watching. Look at this stuff. Sometimes we get a wee cottage or something when we're going on holiday somewhere down south, and they get kitted out with a telly that's better than the one we've got in the house. This is for the amount of telly I watch. This is ridiculous. I eventually get round to. It's one of the things you're always meaning to do, but you never get round to sorting it. But we got a new one, and it's absolutely incredible. It looks like everything's. The problem is, it makes absolutely everything look fantastic, including the adverts. So in the last 24 hours since I got that telly installed, I've bought a new Nissan Qashqai. I bought 5 packs of make your own Christmas cards. I think that I've got the QVC, along with a smashing wee sweater that really brings out the colour in my eyes. That's really, it's just maybe a blouse, I would say, but it really suits me. But that's the problem, because you know, when you get something brand new, it makes everything, even just temporarily, makes everything look brilliant, doesn't it? When you get something brand new, it makes everything. That's the second go I'm having at this analogy with Derek McInnes coming in on Friday, and I mean, eventually down the line you'll say, oh, actually that new telly is making the unit that it's sat on top of, it's making it look a bit old. We're going to have to get into that. You know, the new suit I've got is making, you know, the old shoes make the shoes look a bit old. I need to get a new pair of shoes to go with that new suit, that kind of thing. You know, my new teeth, I need to get new hair to match that. It's really shown up the fact that I'm bald as a coot and all that. But eventually, at first, when you get something brand new and it's supposed to be uplifting, temporarily make everything look good. Do you know what I'm saying? It didn't work out. I'll start off talking of big mistakes. I'll start off with my snagging items. I'm starting off. I'm halfway through this. But I was talking in Friday night's post-match reaction pod about TV things that run on a Friday night when I was a kid, and one I didn't see, I was saying it was Battle. I saw this series, this thing used to be on, and at night time, I think it was a Friday night, and I never got allowed to stay up late enough to watch it, but my pals at school were always talking about it, and it was all about the Second World War, and I'm into the Second World War, and it used to break my heart that I wasn't getting to see it, and it was called Battle. It was all about these Americans after D-Day, you know, fighting their way through Europe. It wasn't. It was called Combat. So there you go. I got that wrong. Apparently it's 1960s series. I looked it up afterwards. I don't think I was missing much, but I'm going to finally get around to watching some of the episodes on YouTube. Stephen McGowan was a journalist whose name I couldn't get. Sorry, Stephen McGowan. There was 3 journalists assembled to discuss Rangers' chances on Reporting Scotland. Rangers' chances in the new SPFL Premiership season on Friday, and Reporting Scotland just an hour or so before kick-off. And it was Michael Grant and Chris McLaughlin, and I could not for the life of me get the. And it's Steve McGowan, who I really like. I like Steve McGowan's stuff. He's a good guy. So I'm really sorry about that, Stephen. I think it was just a night for problems. It was a night for bad stuff. So I know that I've got against Michael Grant. I know he's an Aberdeen man now, but he's a decent fella. So that was somebody I now get in touch to tell us something horrible that Michael Grant said about a Rangers legend or something. That was one of my other mistakes. The big one was the ending of the pod. There was a lot of mistakes in that podcast, a lot of mistakes in this one already, but the main thing was at the end I was trying to wrap up really brilliantly, really kind of snappily, you know, and it was a line that I knew I had in there, but I couldn't quite get it, so I end up just constantly, I spent about 5 minutes kind of circling the drain without ever actually getting it right down the plug hole. I never really got it to just sink in there and go, it's a terrible night because of this, you know. But what I had in mind was the main reason. This is the 4th season in a row that Rangers have failed to win their opening league fixture, and the main reason for that, I was going to say, really quite arch comment, quite pointedly, it was because we're playing them all away from home. You know, because if you win the league, you get to play your opening fixture the following season at home. You know, that, remember we beat Livingston 3-0, and that was when Calvin Bassey announced himself. He came in temporarily to cover for Borna Barisic. It's like, actually wasn't bad, Calvin Bassey. And by the end of the season, he was the greatest improvement I've seen in a player in the shortest time ever. Absolutely amazing from Calvin Bassey. By the end of that season, we're in a European final. But we started off beating Livingston 3-0 in our opening game, the flag-raising day in 2021, 2022, because we'd won the league. You know, that was the point I was trying. So I didn't make that. It was just a terrible podcast following a terrible game. Sorry about that, folks. This one's not much better. And if I'm going to do that kind of stuff, we'll start with the bad stuff, the sad stuff. Franco Baresi. I didn't mention Franco Baresi on Friday. I hope you noticed the wee shrine I had behind me dedicated to Franco Baresi. I didn't want to. I'm slagging Rangers. It's a bad night for Rangers. I don't want to throw in something genuinely sad to offset that. You know, to kind of. Franco Baresi deserves better than that, because Franco Baresi is one of the greatest footballers I have ever had the pleasure of seeing. In the space of about a year, just over a year, I saw Franco Baresi live twice. I saw him playing for this Franco Baresi, who passed away on Friday. The great, if you don't, I mean, he's born in 1960. He's died in 2026. He was aged 66. He retired the number 6 is at Milan at the San Siro for the Rossoneri half of the San Siro. Just a sensational defender, much more than a defender, just a fantastic footballer and a pretty decent guy. by all accounts, taken far, far too young. I think it might have been his funeral yesterday. There was certainly major stuff going on in Milan in tribute to Franco Baresi. I'm talking to you on the Wednesday here, but I saw him at Ibrox in about November. Was it November, December '93? The qualifiers for the 1994 World Cup. We drew 0-0. Scotland drew 0-0. I saw him at Ibrox. You probably maybe you saw this as well. Was it the Legends game? There's a Legends game on Super Alley. Rangers against Milan. It was a Friday night in the end of the season, and like Billy Costa Curta and Franco Baresi, I think, were the centre halves for Milan. 1-0 Rangers. Ali McCoy scores the only goal of the game. Because we never club against them in European competition. We did back in the day, back in the 50s, the early years of the European Cup when Milan got to the final in 58 and lost to Real Madrid in Heysel after extra time. But we definitely played Milan at that point in time in Europe, Rangers as a club. But that Milan team that Franco Baresi played for is probably, you all have teams that we fall in love with that aren't our club. I've looked the Everton team under Howard Kendall that won the league twice in the 80s. I thought they were phenomenal. The Arsenal Invincibles, I thought they were pretty special to watch. I didn't really fall in love with them, but I really liked them. They were great to watch. But probably the greatest all kind of affair, temporary affair. I don't support Milan or anything like that. I don't have any. I'm quite happy to see Inter winning, but that team, that Milan team. A lot of kids just now are younger adults brought up with the Barcelona tiki-taka side and all that. They're infatuated with that. But for me, it was the Milan side of the late 80s and the early to mid-90s, right up into basically they won the Champions League again in 2007. Primarily under Arrigo Sacchi and owned by Silvio Berlusconi, it has to be said. Slightly dodgy to say the least. But this is what happens in football, and then Fabio Capello becoming their manager. But Franco Baresi came to the fore in that side. Utterly magnificent defender. And that was the closest I got to see Rangers playing against them. But if you remember, we drew them. We actually pre-drew Milan when we lost to AEK Athens in the Champions League qualifiers. That would be 94-95 season. Milan had won the 1994 European Cup, the Champions League final was by then. Milan won that, the second Champions League final, beating Barcelona 4-0, which is still the greatest single performance I have. It's not PSG beating Inter 5-0 in the 2025 Champions League final. Must be the greatest performance I've ever seen, but I'm of an era. I just can't get into it the same, no pun intended. That Milan side's, I'm only like 24, 25 at that time, and I'm still trying to play football myself. It was just unbelievable what they did, and the reason it was so unbelievable when they won that 1994 Champions League final in Athens against Barcelona was because Franco Baresi wasn't playing. Alessandro Costa Curta wasn't playing. The two centre halves, the two stoppers, if you like, for Milan were suspended because of the world-class diving of Jurgen Klinsmann in the one-leg semi-final against Monaco, where Monaco lose, Milan go through to the final, but and they lost the previous final, of course, to the bent Marseille side. Milan, no strangers to the dodgy side of the game themselves as a club, but they'd lost to that Marseille side in '93, and they go through to the final in '94, but they were without Baresi and Costa Curta, their centre halves, because one gets sent off, the other one got a yellow card that took them over the limit for suspensions, and they were both suspended from the final. So they were up against Cruyff's Barcelona dream team, like Stoichkov and Romario up front, and it was like, how the hell are this team that had won the league, they won Serie A that season by winning most of their games 2-1 or 1-0 or drawn 0-0. They conceded only 15 goals that season in Serie A, and I think they scored 30 odd. They basically won Serie A 2-1. They only scored just over twice as many goals as they'd conceded. That Milan side, they had relied like hell on Costa Curta and Baresi. And you get Paolo Maldini in there. It's a phenomenal side. But Baresi, the cap, he's right at the middle of it, and he's suspended for the final. And Milan is out there. Maldini goes into centre half. Filippo Galli comes out the reserves. This young guy Panucci, they have to shove him in. He's become he's playing a bit more regularly, but still a bit in emergency. You get Mauro Tassotti at fullback, but he can't do it on his own. They're going to get destroyed by this Barcelona dream team, and they just attack them. Milan just decide to attack Cruyff's Barcelona, and they beat them 4-0. And it's one of the greatest to switch your entire style of play. From defence all season through to attack. They've been attacking pretty healthily in Europe. And of course, I get into that final, the second straight Champions League final. And they go to 3 straight. They lost the following one to Ajax in Vienna. But my God, they were phenomenal. It was because Franco Baresi wasn't playing that made that so phenomenal. And the following season, it was pre-drawn, the final. It was the greatest display. I had it in video. In fact, I've still got it up there. It's worn thin, the VHS video. I used to watch it before I was going play fives. This exhibition from Milan in that final, no matter what Barcelona did, they just ripped them to pieces. It was beautiful football. And the following season, we got Ajax Athens, but we knew that if we beat Ajax Athens, this is why I don't like to talk about Iberia, Tbilisi, or Larn in the next round, in the playoff round of the Europa League. We knew that if we beat Ajax Athens, we would get Milan and Ajax. We would be in the group with them in the Champions League group stage. And that was it. My mate and I were like, we've got to go. We're going to have to go to this Rangers, this Milan side. We love them. We're going to have to go to the San, book it, and we get to go to the San Siro as well. And of course, Ajax Athens, not only did Ajax Athens put us out, as you'll remember well, we didn't get through. That was us out of Europe. But because of crowd trouble, was it the semi-final against Inter the previous season, the Milan couldn't play at the San Siro. So we wouldn't have got to the San Siro either. I think it was Trieste they played their games. I don't know if it was all 3 of their home group games, but they certainly... And Ajax gave them a kind of going over as well in Italy before doing them 1-0 in the final. But we wouldn't have got there either. So my mate and I... Milan didn't play us in 1950... Is it 57, 58 season? Milan, I think they beat us 4-1 at Ibrox. They beat us heavily at Ibrox anyway. They didn't even do us the respect of playing us at the San Siro in the second leg. They moved it to the very famous, but it's just an athletic stadium, basically. The Milan Stadium. It's like, I think Napoleon opened it. Napoleon built it back in the day, which is next to the San Siro, which is basically it's a wee concert venue, and it's the trotting there as well. There's a separate venue altogether, but it's a wee stadium. It's basically like playing as at Lesser Hampden instead of Hampden in Milan. That's what they did. They played us there because they weren't going to get enough of a crowd for a game that was a tie that was a foregone conclusion. And then we played Inter under Alec McLeish in the Champions League in that was the semi-final riot that had started that one against the Milan derby riot in the semi-final. That meant the San Siro was closed, so we played Inter at an empty San Siro, not knowing that become a thing under COVID. So it's quite weird. We never seem to get to the San Siro. But, I mean, we did. The first tie I ever attended was the second leg of us playing Inter, losing 3-0 to Inter in the San Siro in the UEFA Cup. But we wouldn't have got there anyway. But my mate and I, we was like, right, well, we're just going to have to go. So we booked up the Derby della Madonnina. We went to the Milan Derby, I think it was about December 1994. We went to San Siro. We had this organised trip to the San Siro and stayed in Milan for a couple of nights. It was sensational. We were only, 25 at the time. And it was different class. And Inter had won the UEFA Cup at that point. And so the two of them are playing, and this is the Champions League holders against the UEFA Cup holders in a local derby, both at their home stadium, so to speak. I think Inter were the home team. The atmosphere was phenomenal. No like an Old Firm derby, but it was absolutely phenomenal. It was grand, a grand atmosphere, very spectacular. And the football was two times in that game. Paolo Maldini scored for Milan, which is quite a thing to be able to say that you've seen. To go to San Siro, if you've ever been, it's unreal. What a phenomenal stadium. Just, I don't know, it's like a combination of a spaceship has landed and also a kind of Roman amphitheatre. It doesn't look like a Roman amphitheatre, but it's just got that ancient feel about it as well. Unbelievable. But Franco Baresi's playing that game, and twice in that game there was a 50-50 between Giuseppe Bergami of Inter and Franco Baresi of Milan. I don't know who won either of them, but I swear the whole place shook. The 2 times they tackled each other, the whole place shook. But of course, Franco Baresi was more about timing and technique and just hard as nails, obviously, but what a footballer. So I saw him live. I saw him playing in Serie A. I saw him playing in the Milan Derby, and I also saw him in the flesh. It would be just a year before that, maybe just over a year before that, when he played at Ibrox. I've seen him in the San Siro and Ibrox competitively. Such an honour. And it was Italy, playing for Italy in their beautiful white away kit, white top against Scotland. Hampden being done up at the time. And we could. It was Andy Roxburgh's Scotland, wasn't it? And we couldn't get through. We couldn't get past them. Gordon Dury misses a sitter because he was concussed from an earlier tackle. But like Roberto Baggio, Franco Baresi, Paolo Maldini, they're playing in this game. Roberto Donadoni, I think, come on as a substitute. Beppe Signori, Gigi Lentini, a fantastic Italian team, but Franco Baresi was there ensuring a nil. There was a nil that Franco Baresi was responsible for. And that was the World Cup qualifying campaign. We didn't qualify, but Italy did, and they get to the final. And Franco Baresi, a month or 2 months after not getting to play against Romario in the Champions League final, does play against Romario and holds him to 0-0 after 120 minutes in the Pasadena Rose Bowl for 94,000 in that 1994 World Cup final. And you can still watch it on YouTube, just excerpts of Franco Baresi defending in that game, one of the greatest defensive displays ever seen. And it's a World Cup final against Brazil, the most attacking team, the team with the most... the reputation for the most flair, the most attacking skill on the planet. Franco Baresi holds him to 0, and of course he misses the penalty. Him and Baggio miss penalties that let Brazil win the World Cup, the first World Cup final to finish 0-0, and we'd seen Franco Baresi playing at 0-0 at Ibrox. For me, that was right up there. It's like Fabio Gross-Walter's Scotland manager, and we draw 1 each with Italy at Hampden. Italy didn't win until 2006. It's the first time Italy had ever won competitively in Scotland. We never let them win at Hampden. Well, John Gregg scores a winner against them in the 60s and the qualifiers for the 66 World Cup, but we never go through, and Italy always go through. They get humiliated in the 66 World Cup, though. They went out to North Korea at Middlesbrough. But in 2006, it's the qualifiers for the 2006 World Cup. So maybe the game was 2005, when Walter's Scotland manager. And Kenny Miller scores. And I was actually on television because I was running down the steps in the North Stand because I was just... I think it was Nesta was playing. I think Nesta was sitting up with sitting in Cannavaro. Nesta and Cannavaro. Kenny Miller goes up, header, bang, 1-0 Scotland. That was something worth celebrating. And at that point, Italy had never scored in Scotland, but Fabio Grosso scored the equaliser for Italy that day, and Fabio Grosso scores the winning penalty in the World Cup final in 2006. So there's a tie-in when Italy. But Franco Baresi, one of the greatest of all time, taken far too early, and that's not right. I'm supposed to talk about Rangers here. I don't want to because I'm upset, and all I can do is be truthful. Tannadice was the kind of game that we're supposed to win under Derek McInnes. Precisely the kind of scenario in which his street smarts, his insider Rangers knowledge, his Rangers support in life, his kind of SPFL Premiership knowledge was supposed to triumph. It's tight, it's intense, it's untidy, and we've got players injured and positions not properly filled. That was the deal. Derek McInnes in as manager. Friday's the kind of School of Hard Knocks tie, which, head in the clouds, Russell Martin and Danny Geeksville rule just don't know how to get over the line. We need in a kind of cunning realist. He still fucked it up though, didn't he? But it's okay. Because apparently, and this has been annoying me for the last few days, apparently it's okay this time for us to mess up on opening day of the season. Last season, with the exact same scenario, we draw away from home on the opening day of the season against a fairly difficult opponent, but somebody we should also be able to beat. And it's the reaction is, get Russell Martin gone, get him out of here. This season, however, the squad's it's still gelling. We need to get a few more signings in the door. It's a marathon, no a sprint. Are you fucking kidding? Are you kidding? Look, calm down. It's not the same as Fir Park last season because Motherwell at that point also had a new manager and they had a developing team. They'd lost to Clyde, I think, or drawn with Clyde, who were almost dropping out the league in the League Cup group stages before that. So this is Jens Bertel Askew. He was in the exact same situation. as Russell Martin, and he's in that situation at Motherwell, which is so scaled down for the resources Russell Martin's got, so he's supposed to give them a doing. So it was much more upsetting. But Jim Goodwin is he's starting his 4th straight season as Dundee United manager, and that's but he's got as many new signings as us this season so far. Jim Goodwin, he was talking about there's a new tactical model, a new tactical blueprint he's got out there on Friday night. And Russell Martin, at least when he they've lost to Montrose in the League Cup group stages this season, Dundee United. And Russell Martin, when he went to Fir Park last season on opening day, he'd already put Panathinaikos out the Champions League qualifiers. So he had like a hardcore, positive, great result. His first competitive game was a 2-0 home win over Panathinaikos. He then goes over to Athens and draws. Oh, we didn't like how it happened. We didn't like how it was done. But we should be winning that game on Friday night and no liking how Derek McInnes did it. That was the kind of game where you win, but you're not chuffed with the performance. It's not a game you drop points. So, and Russell Martin, who I need to continually point out, I did not want to get the job. But I feel as if it was instantly, he's got to get sacked. Whereas in the case of Derek McInnes, I feel the supporters, as led kind of by social media and podders, are giving McInnes the very level of cool patience never afforded Russell Martin. But hey, that's just bitterness in my part. I didn't want Martin in the job in the first place, but it's just weird that the times we decide that we're going to be kind of coolly analytical. Perhaps if we'd no booed Rangers off at half-time versus Kilmarnock under Danny Rule for winning 1-0 versus 10 men, then maybe, I don't know, maybe things could have went a bit better than that. But we saw zero good team football on Friday. Defensive solidity at the expense of attacking flair. That was the bargain. Where was it? That was the bargain we're taking on Derek McInnes. Where was it? Our defence was a mess. Danny Rule was never going to stay anyway. I don't know, I'm bringing him into it, but it's like the brilliant attacking displays we saw from his sides in one half of games. Danny Rule's side would have brilliant displays in one half of a game or in moments in games. Usually the first half. That was more annoying somehow to us than seeing nothing at all of any hope for the entire game. There was a bargain struck when we brought in Derek McInnes. The only excitement would be the excitement of continual victory. No 4-2-2-2 formation, no going 2-0 up versus Celtic with magical goals in the first half at Ibrox, but also no letting Celtic come back from 2 goals down. Not a lot of getting tight games over the line rather than letting easy games become tight as we did under Danny Rule. There's no slacking off when we equalise. We're not supposed to be slacking off now when we equalise. There's no relying on one goal. Winning the opening league fixture is part of that deal as far as I'm concerned. It's why Derek McInnes is here. This is the kind of game he was supposed to win. It really pisses me off the overwhelming patience and understanding being afforded to Derek McInnes in the last few days, almost a week now, which just wasn't there for Russell Martin at the same stage, where we also get the kind of, the banners ready at this stage, like for Dan Purdy and for Thelwell Jr. It's everybody but Derek McInnes' fault. And I hope that's fine. I like Derek McInnes and all that, but the game at Tannadice on Friday had all the hallmarks of the kind of game Derek McInnes was supposed to win, and he didn't. He takes us into the kind of game he's supposed to lose, and seriously could on Thursday night against Jagiellonia Bialystok. He'd better not lose it. He'd better not. I don't give a shit about the lack of wingers. There's enough there. There's enough players there. What we're missing. I've been hearing giving the manager the tools. I've seen that headline. I've seen that quote. You've got to give the man the tools to get it right. Don't get me wrong. There's plenty of people who are going off their nut. I don't want Derek McInnes sacked in like that. I think he is going to be a success as Rangers manager. I think he is going to win as the league. But I want to get as upset about that as people were getting upset 40 years ago when Graham Souness gets sent off at Easter Road in his first league game as Rangers manager, and everybody except Alan Rough was booked. I want that kind of disgrace level, because we need to reconvene. We need a massive slap to the curtain, wake up call. I'm seeing a lot of people just give the manager the tools. It's not his fault, and I feel as if there's too many people too invested in Derek McInnes being the answer to everything. the last thing they're going to do is give him any blame. What we're missing just now, the thing that's letting Derek McInnes off the park, is Scov Olsen, who's a dud, and Mikey Moore, who's a child. He's a great player, Mikey Moore is fantastic, but he's a project player. There's enough there. Friday should have been a 2-1 win in which we still played poorly. We played poorly, but it doesn't have to be. The whole point of Derek McInnes is that's the kind of games he's supposed to be winning. That's what we've, because we've gone backwards, remember. It's a backward step. I didn't want Russell Martin to get the job, but I could absolutely understand why he did. Football just changed. Russell Martin, I've heard a lot of people saying this week as well, and it's absolutely true. Rangers didn't slip up last season because we couldn't break down a low block, which is what Russell Martin was setting us up to do, to play against the low block, which had been the way the rest of Scottish football outside Celtic had played against us for most of the last decade or so, or most of our entire history, I would imagine. But Motherwell beat us by common hat, as it was Rangers who were playing a low block against Hearts at Tynecastle towards the end of last season. We're beating them 1-0, Hearts kind of hitting them in the break, and we can't really get out our own half. We're playing possession football in our own half. Motherwell were coming at us, everybody last season. We couldn't handle it. Falkirk playing us at football, it ends up we've total cricket scores for both sides. A couple of games against Falkirk, high scoring matches. Folk had just gone for one. Hearts were going for his Celtic, us unable to get out our own half in the second half of the game at Ibrox, the 2-each draw with Celtic in the league last season. That was typical of the way things would actually happen. So it changed for football. I think it's just changed. While Russell Martin was at Rangers, I didn't want him to come to Rangers. I was pretty sure he was going to be a failure. But once he's there, you've got to kind of get behind the guy or appreciate. We understand why he's been brought in. I didn't want Russell Martin to get the job. I could absolutely understand why he did get it, and I was happy to see Derek McInnes get the job, but I'm wary of why he did get it. Retrograde are, as it has to be said, the kind of the pinstripe kit, in which it's reviving a kit which I loved at the time. I've still got it here, my original one from 40 odd years ago, the Pinstripe Rangers kit, Umbro back in the day. But it was a kit in which we wore for 2 seasons. We won one and lost one Old Firm League Cup final in it, and we lost a Scottish Cup final in it. That is it. We get nowhere near winning the league. It's more like the 5 straight defeats. Remember when we lost 4 straight games towards the end of last season under Danny Rule, that basically cost us the league title, and we were comparing it to, when's the last time Rangers went 3 league games in a row, defeated 4 league defeats in a row for Rangers? When's the last time and we went back to, it was when Jock Wallace came in, the second season of us having that kit, that pinstripe kit, and immediately changed the socks back to the red and black socks, which I was in love with at the time. I loved that, going back to the red and black socks. Obviously, Jock Wallace, a massive hero of mine at the time as well. And that was fantastic. Oh, we've got the red and black socks, but still the pinstripe kit. But that was the last time we lost 5 in the trot, more than our 4 games in the trot, as it was last season. When we were struggling to finish in the top half of the league, never mind actually challenge for the title. I just feel as if going back to that kit is perfectly in keeping with a distrust, and a hatred at times of anything progressive, tactically or politically. We don't want a head coach. We want a manager. We want the brown brogues and the blazer. We want a Scottish Protestant ex-Ranger who has got 1 League Cup to his name as a manager to take us back to the glory years, to take us back. So let's take us back. Give the manager the tools. Heard that multiple times. Rangers Review on Friday nights, post-match. I didn't listen to it until a few days later. Panicking about mentioning Tav's glaringly obvious absence in that game, where we couldn't get down the wings, we couldn't get any possession for sustained possession outside the United box or just inside the United box. So somebody mentions in Rangers Review, James Tavernier, I was mentioning it as well, as glaringly obvious. Oh no, we don't want to go too early. Why not? What are you fucking scared of? Are you trying to appeal to the knee-jerkers, the hate-mongers, the kind of loudmouths? I don't know, but it seems we want the brown brogues and the blazer. We want a Scottish Proddy ex-Ranger. Take us back to glory. Take us back. Oh, this talk. Derek McInnes sitting on Sky in a little piece before we went to the coverage of the game, where he's sitting in the manager's office at Ibrox and he's talking about John Gregg and Jock Wallace and all that, and it's taking us back. It pairs literally with an inability to accept anything. Did I say literally? I meant lethally. With an inability to accept anything that isn't instantly perfect. This is more of a risk than the Martin appointment, this thing. It will go backwards. We'll just get a manager who can because Celtic have been shit in Europe compared to us for this entire decade. So therefore, we need to be as shit as them in the league in order to get the fans. All we're missing is what we're not getting. We need to get the league under our belt to feel that we're properly back from 2012, although don't mention 2012. I think it's rather than waiting for a Clement or a Gio to make us as great in Scotland as they're already making us in Europe, let's, rather than seeing what Danny Rowe can do in parts of a game and trying to make us do that in entire games, give him a few more minutes. I mean, Rowe was going to leave anyway. We'd rather see shite, stolid football which doesn't commit what seems to be the most kind of grievous crime you can get at Ibrox these days, which is getting our hopes up. You get your hopes up because you're seeing something hopeful. You're seeing something good. There was nothing good about that performance on Friday night, except for Thilo Asgard's goal, but he doesn't do it often enough, does it? I'm the guy who spends the whole season talking about I hated watching Nico Raskin playing world-class football against Falkirk in the game before the split last season, our last regular season game, because it got my hopes up going into that split, thinking we're going to win the title. And he just collapses and disappears. So I'm as bad as everybody else. I'm talking as a Rangers supporter, talking to Rangers supporters on this. It's a family thing. We don't want to see what Daniel could do in parts of games. We want to do it if he can do it in an entire game like that. The first half against Celtic last season, in that 2-each game in the league at Ibrox, we were absolutely magnificent. Surely it's worth thinking, well, this guy's only been here since November. He's only got in the kind of players that he wants, a few of them in January. Give him a whole pre-season. Maybe we're going to have to be patient at some point, and maybe it's good that we're doing it just now. With Derek McInnes, I just find it a bit hypocritical, and it kind of gets on my nerves. The obvious thing to do, if I want to go really OTT, but this is link it to all these kind of Rangers shots you see at the anti-Antifa rallies. I know as a support, any kind of retrograde, anything that wants to go backwards all the time, anything that harkens for a past that wasn't really there, it wasn't there like that. I know our continual failure in the pitch has raised a generation of kind of genocidal Celtic fans who wear all the right T-shirt. No, their grandchildren lobby Tims, all that kind of stuff. What the ethnic cleansing are you talking about? They back all the right causes, but they can ironically and hatefully assert that no Rangers fan can feel the same way politically, and left wing or whatever. They don't feel these causes. They wear them like badges. But there's plenty of Celtic fans who do feel these causes, and they're folk that I trust with my life, great people, but you only hear the loudmouth. You only get the. I think it ends up creating. The reason I mention this is I think it ends up creating this idea of ourselves sometimes that we just want to behave in a way that it conforms to what Celtic fans will hate. And it's. I say this to the kind of knee-jerk, the loudmouth, the lowest common denominator panderers who refuse to acknowledge our situation is caused by 2012, while also slagging our European achievements in a way which any bitter Celtic fan could be proud of. I've heard this, Rangers fans just, but we lost the final in Seville. When I try to say, but look at our European achievements in the 2020s when we're no winning the league. Look at what we've done in Europe. That counts for as much, if not more, than what you do in Scotland. For particularly Scotland's place in European club competition just now, the coefficient, etc. For us to be able to get into a European final, it's phenomenal. No, we didn't win it, so we're losers. I've had Rangers fans saying that to me. And it's like, that is Celtic patter. That's Celtic patter. To tell us that we're losers because we got to a European final, which they did in Seville in 2003 and still get 20 years of business out of it. Russell Martin had to go. I'm not saying Russell Martin was a great guy. Russell Martin had to go, but I think the reasons behind so much of the kind of instant hate for him are, I fear, morphing out of control from a kind of fear-addled algorithm-generated bigotry into an actual campaign against anything that seems clever or compassionate or, God forbid, progressive. We're becoming almost anti-intellectual, I think, as a support. Not everybody. There's a kind of dominating narrative, a kind of an undertow even, and I think it comes from the podcasters trying to get particular, the knee-jerkers on side all the time. we're becoming almost anti-intellectual, Khmer Rouge style, and it's not even working. It's not getting us anywhere. It didn't work for Khmer Rouge either. It's not working for the club. As I say, look, I hate this. I hate talking about this. I'm being, you don't take me seriously. Everything is polarised. Yes, I said polls. Everything's polarised these days. Football's about rivalry, but rivalries within our own support are the worst. Such an emotional subject, it's almost impossible not to end up sounding like you want Rangers to win or lose only to prove your own agenda. I just want Rangers all to go my way, the way that suits what I think about that particular manager. But I will say that with me, it's about agendas. My opinion's not worth shit. My football opinion's not worth shit. I mean, I'm clueless about tactics and methodology of football, but my beef is not with Derek McInnes, who handled Friday's post-match presser really well and really should be able to win the title with us. And I wouldn't, the way my mind works, the way it generally tends to work with football is if you don't slip up on your first game, I'm more concerned. I'm more concerned when a manager comes in and can make us think everything's perfect when we know it isn't at Rangers right now. But I mean, I feel as if we could have got... Derek McInnes' job is to get a tune out of JD Gassama, is to go in there and, first competitive game last season, JD Gassama scores a wonder goal against Panathinaikos. He looks more buff, more kind of filled out, does JD Gassama. I think he was trying. You've also got Finlay Cameron there. I always say Finlay. Another mention to Finn Cameron's a great guy on this podcast. One of the subscribers to this podcast, Finlay Curtis. It's early season for me as well, and that's what I'm talking about, the rustiness early season. Finlay Curtis, he's been at the World Cup, maybe a bit drained by it all. Maybe he's one of the players that Derek McInnes was talking about pre-match. I think he's used that start who didn't perform so well in training, didn't show the right attitude. I think Derek McInnes used his starting 11 on Friday, exactly the same way that Russell Martin used the post-match interviews at Fir Park after the first game in the league last season, to lay into players, to lay down a marker, to try and show, And he said a few folks saying, why are you not starting Chermiti? Why are you not starting Dan Neil in that game? We totally improved after the two of them came on in the second half, but he's not getting anywhere near as tight as Russell Martin, who gave the established players, their heads. James Tavernier scores. Nico Raskin, I don't know how. I think he played well in spells in that game against Motherwell last season, but these were the guys he was needing to show who was boss, and he lays into them because they don't supply the result. I think that's a good way to go about it. I'm somebody, as I say, who maybe you can see that the opening game, the opening league game of the season is maybe the best. It maybe suits us best after a period of not winning anything domestically, not winning major trophies domestically. That's the best to just really kick everybody up the arse, put everybody in their place, is with a bad result, is with a setback. But I think Derek McInnes is a guy who will be able to win the title with us. My beef is about the kind of some of the attendant reasons, other than the football, why people might prefer Derek McInnes to Russell Martin or to Danny Rowe, and it's about the veracity of that thinking, the authenticity of that metric, those kind of rubrics. Are we going to stick by McInnes when he's winning trebles, but Celtic are winning the Conference League, and telling us, as per Seville in 2003, that that's the only thing that counts, that Europe is the only thing that counts, because it will happen again. This is what will happen. I'm worried that we as a support are getting guided by stultifying hate rather than progressive hope. And I mean the stultifying hate of Celtic fans as well as within our own support, because our current owners are guided by us. They are reacting to what they see in the stands, to the protests last season, whatever. The mainstream media will join in as well. And that's, you don't sign a Catholic for 70 years. You deserve to get your fucking asses kicked and have people suspicious of you. But I think the mainstream media will join in if Celtic start doing well in Europe, as they inevitably will if we end up winning the league anytime soon. And that becomes the emphasis again. I just don't want us, if we're just being guided by what's been thrown in our face, we need to think for ourselves, is what I'm trying to say. We don't seem to have appreciated what we've done in Europe since Steven Gerrard first arrived at the club. We ourselves are harder on the team because they're not winning the far inferior SPFL Premiership. I mean, that's a reason to be more unhappy, because it's far inferior to European competition. But if you're winning in Europe, it's surely a matter of time till it trickles down into your domestic performances. But if you keep sacking managers because they're not doing well in Europe, I don't know. I'm a bit concerned. There's this whole thing about. I mean, Derek McInnes just. We hated Russell Martin because he was, he was a green, and he wouldn't wear the brogues and the suit. He voted green. That he was seen as being horrible. Whereas Derek McInnes, who's like a man who's suntanned, and he's. I mean, Derek McInnes is only 2 years younger than me. I know I'm a particularly brutal example of how people can let themselves go, physically, aesthetically. But it's just, in his downtime, Deeks has got the white trainers on and the skin tight jeans. He's dressing like a guy 30 years younger. That's as concerning for me. We seem to be confused. We want to go with people wearing the brown brogues and the brown brogues and the suit and all that, and maybe even a wee cardigan, because it reminds us of Walter, and we think it's. I mean, Bill Struth was a dandy. He's more like Derek McInnes with his suntan and his sleek backed hair and the trainers and that kind of thing. But if we want to go back to a kind of more conservative approach, it would seem weird that we're quite happy with Derek McInnes when he's dressing like a kind of Alder Ned or whatever. He's dressing like a dude, and just I think he's a working class hero. This is what people. I think he's a great guy, but I don't get why he's not been criticised for not speaking as politely and as fluently, perhaps as articulately as Walter Smith. And why he's not dressing as kind of down, humble, respectable as Walter Smith when we seem to want. I don't know. There seems to be a kind of confusion going on in our general attitude to what we want, and it just came to a head with me on Friday night. Daisuke Yokota, we've bought a Japanese left-footed right winger, so I'm assuming that means Václav Černý isn't returning. Daisuke Yokota, Japanese 26-year-old winger. We've got him from the House of Hanover, total staunch. Hanover 96. He's been playing in the second tier in Germany. Apparently he's off to Poland. We're trying to get him into the European squad. We got him for 2.75 million, rising to I think 3.25 million, dependent on performance and appearances. So you would think that means that he's going to wear the number 17 shirt, apparently. You think that means that Václav Černý isn't going to return. That deal's off, and yet we've put in this £8 million bid or something that was knocked back for Fares Gajemis, the Algerian, who's nearly 24 years old, who can play on either wing but prefers to go on the right-hand side using his inverted foot, his left foot. Are we merely signing Yokota as backup before we get the main act on board? Because he's done okay, I think, in the second tier in German football. Hanover were up the top end. I think they finished fourth last season, didn't get promoted, but it's not a level that I find kind of particularly scintillating. I don't think his stats are particularly great. We hope he'll be a lot better in Scotland, of course, and I've got, Derek McInnes has come from Hearts, where they got Claudio Braga, who was playing with second division Norwegian football, and ended up becoming an absolute sensation of the Scottish Premier League last season, the SPFL Premiership, should I say. So there's no saying that he won't be a starter, but if we're putting in this heavy-duty bids for Fares Geddes, the Algerian who's he plays for Frosinone. He joined Frosinone in the January of their relegation from Serie A back in 2024. He's played the last 2 seasons in Serie B, but that's the end of last season they get promoted back up into Serie A in Italy, the Frosinone. So, but I think they're wanting like 13 million from him or something like that. Rangers have offered 8. Celtic have also offered big money for him too. So I don't know if we're actually going to get pure kind of wide in more ways than one in the transfer window before it closes. We're going to start putting in some serious bids because it doesn't close until the end of August, and maybe the team's just going to. It's a weird one to get into with Celtic as well. That's a wee mini battle there going on for us with Celtic, but it's a strange one. I don't know why. It's maybe if we get Gajemis on top of Yokota, particularly paid such serious money, we'd have to pay such serious money for the Algerian, who played, I think, a few minutes of injury time against Austria in Algeria's final group game in that World Cup. They eventually went out 2-0 in the round of 32 to Switzerland and Vancouver, didn't they, Algeria? Didn't have a great World Cup, but at least they got through to the knockout stages, which is more can be said for Scotland. But he went with the squad anyways. I said he's nearly 24 years old, a great experience for him. He basically played a few minutes injury time in one match, that was it. But good experience for him. But he's the next best thing in Italy, and they want serious money for him, do Frosinone, and we're kind of bidding for him. And he seems to be somebody who wants to play in the right wing off his left foot, as does Daisuke Yokota, who has signed for us. So we're either going to sign this guy to put him on the other wing, get them to put him on the other wing, or Yokota, we're spending best part of £3 million on a backup, on an understudy. That would indicate that we are about to go mental. Maybe we're already got a mortgage on the anticipated Nico Raskin money. Nico Raskin is in the European squad, though. He hasn't been sold yet. That's more we can say for Ben Godfrey, who was in serious pain and looked pissed off on Friday night when he came off early at Tannadice. He feared the worst, and it's true. He's out for a month anyway, so he's not in the European squad. Neither is John Suter, and it would seem that's a bit of a silly one, because we're now short of centre halves. The talk is he's going to go somewhere down south. John Suter has been told by Derek McInnes that he's not going to get first team football. Oh, is that him going to? I mean, if that had been, again, if that had been Russell Martin saying that, we would hate Russell Martin for being so previous. Clinton Inciala of Westerlo and Ross McCausland of Aris Limassol are in the European squads. So is Nico Raskin, who surely is leaving at any time. Lyle Cameron's in it, interesting. But the best of all is Olwetu Makanya, who we just signed from the Philadelphia Union for $3 million, from the MLS for $3 million. He is in the European squad. He got his work permits and all that, the clearance required, because he is going to be required on Thursday. Rangers against Poles. I'll do my starting 11, predicted starting 11, and predicted score, and a quick roundup, folks, then I'll get you out of here. I'm sorry for making this so long and ranty. I should have done a separate pod reacting, again, the fallout from the game at Tannadice, and then a game previewing, another pod previewing this game, but needs must. I'm also not going to be able to cover thank God says you, the press conference, Derek McInnes' press conference in Poland tonight, even though my pod will be out just after it. I've got something on Wednesday night. If he says anything major, then I'll do a quick 3-minute pod about it tomorrow. But yeah, Rangers against Poland, quite interesting. We've played, I think this is going to be our 12th game versus Poles and our 7th tie versus the 6th Polish club we've faced. Remember we played Anzi Makachkala, who are from Dagestan, part of Russia. They're Russian. We played them in the 2001-2002 UEFA Cup. That was at Legia Warsaw's ground, which was since played on against Legia Warsaw since after they did it up. They got the stadium done up in between times at Legia Warsaw, but we played there at the Polish Army Stadium under the Little General, against Andy Min. Bert Konteman, only goal of the game, because we couldn't. Dagestan was too dangerous. We couldn't go there. So instead of having home and away, we played them just a one-off game in Warsaw. We got quite a strange relationship with Poland. Have Rangers. So Gornik are the only team we've played twice, the only Polish team we've played twice in Europe. I say they beat us 3-1 at home and 3-1 away in the 1969-70 Cup Winners' Cup, the second round. That was Davy White. He was done in by that. I think he eventually got sacked for that one. The only Polish European finalist, I said earlier, they lost to Man City in the final. But that was the second round of the 69-70 Cup Winners' Cup. We'd beaten Stoy Bucharest in the previous round. The next time we played Gornik was the 87-88 European Cup. We beat them 2-0 at home. We drew 1 each away. This is under Graham Souness. And then we get pit out by that European Cup by Stoy Bucharest in the previous. So it's like if we got Gornik and Stoy Bucharest one round after the other, and we'll beat one and lose to the other. We can't beat both of them in the same cup. It's quite a coincidence there. That was just before we get put out by Stoya, but that was the game I missed that season in Europe, so still got to get them off the list. Gornik, and they are in the Champions League qualifiers, I think. This week they could drop down in the Europa League. In 1988-89 we played Katowice. Remember, we beat them 4-2 over there. The first leg was at Ibrox. I was in the Eastern Closer for that, right in front of where the doctor deliberately, or John Brown booted the time-wasting doctor's briefcase, his medical case, and his stuff was all over the park, and that was great. That meant that he could waste even more time, but they only beat them 1-0 Katowice at Ibrox in that game, but we did them 4-2 away from home in the UEFA Cup in 1988-89, 2004-2005. Amica Ronki, who no longer exist, we beat them 5-0 in Poland, in Amica, or in Ronchi. I'm not sure. And that was the UEFA Cup group stage. He's beaten them 5-0. We only played them away from home. That was the first time we did this thing of only playing a team at home or away, and that was under Paul Le Guen when we got out the group stage. Legia Warsaw, famously 2019-20 Europa League playoff, draw 0-0 in Warsaw, and they've got the big banner of the Pope in the away end at Ibrox, the away corner at Ibrox, and we beat them 1-0 right in the last minute of injury time. We thought it was heading for extra time. Big Alfredo, what a season he had. And he goes with a head. That was a great night. Everybody was going berserk in a way that I just didn't. I wasn't expecting, although we're all feeling it at the time. It was we wanted European football so much. Let's not kid ourselves that we don't. Lech Poznan, of course, the COVID season, also 55 season. We played them in the group stage of the Europa League. We beat them 1-0 at home. Alfredo got the only goal of the game, and we beat them 2-0 away from home. Cedric Itten and Jorge Hagi's boy, can't remember his name. Janis Hagi scoring away from home in Poland. So this is a 12th game. It's our 7th tie against Poles, and we've only lost one. And that was the very first one to go on. But our work will be cut out to win this one. How are we going to do it? I've absolutely no idea what our starting 11 is going to be, because we don't know. I mean, Nico Raskin, he can't be getting included in the squad. His head can't be in the right place. That's it. He wants away. You've got to think he's got a certain level of fitness. It's only like 2 minutes ago he was playing quarterfinals of the World Cup. Latter stages of the World Cup, you've got to think he's probably able to do a job, and we might need him because we're so lightweight. But nah, I think we don't want to risk the £40 million that we're going to get from by possibly getting injured in this game. He won't have any time under Derek McInnes at all, so I don't expect Raskin to play. I've no idea how Derek McInnes is going to play in Europe. I haven't really studied. He obviously wasn't in charge of Hearts weren't in Europe last season, which helped him in his league challenge. The season before that, it wasn't Derek McInnes who was in charge when they were playing in the Conference League, the Jambos. But he did really go Aberdeen into Europe every season he was there. Did sneak up against some pretty tough opponents, Real Sociedad being one of them, if I remember correctly. And I don't think he ever took a tanking, so it just doesn't seem to be why he's been brought here. But I'm going to go Ivor Pandor, obviously, in goals. Josh Gentles is the other Welshman in the squad. I think I might have been calling him Ivan Pandor. It's Ivor Pandor. I'm going to have him in goals. Obviously, he did quite well against Dundee United. He's looking like a good signing. I see Hull getting a slightly more expensive goalkeeper, obviously in front of Jack Butland for that Hull's return to the top flight in England. I'm going to do Dujon Sterling at right back. Ross McCrory does not look ready. I'm going to do Dujon Sterling at right back with Fernandez and Macania, the new chap, £3 million, Philadelphia Union. Get him into centre half as well, and have two Romans at left back. Me personally, I would go 4-3-3 and have Dan Neil, Dragojevic, who I've never seen playing before, and Cammy Devlin, but I just know he's going to be great. So I would have Dan Neil, Dragojevic, and Cammy Devlin as a 3 across that slightly dodgy back 4, and I would have Asgard on the right, Shankland in the middle, and Chermiti on the left of a front 3, which would morph about. Asgard would go kind of 10ish. Shankland and Chermiti would play alongside each other as a 2 or whatever. Maybe that's crazy. I don't know, but I don't think we're good enough defensively to just have one man up front. I think we need to take the game to Jagiellonia. And the stadium was the Municipal Stadium, which is the something arena for, I've got it written down somewhere, the Majewski Stadium, which is also the Chorton Arena. It might be called something else as well. Sponsorship changing all the time. But it looks at first like it's a double-sized Almondvale. Tony Macaroni, same kind of colour, but it's got 2 tiers right the way around, fully enclosed. They've been doing it up over the years. It was quite a scary looking ground at times, very exposed, lots of open terrace and what have you. A bit of a dump it looked like when you used to see it in the telly initially, but they've got it properly done up, fully roofed and all that. Looks really nice. But at each end, it's actually a cop. The 2-tier thing goes right around the sides and comes right round into like the ends behind the goal, but both of them, it's like a sheer kind of cop. They've got the seats arranged in one single tier, but to the same height behind each goal. So it's going to be close to the pitch, tight atmosphere. I think they'll see us as a big gun. I mean, we've got a reputation, we've got a name, 5 European finals, only one Polish club's ever reached the European final once. Oh, they beat us in the way there, so maybe they'll know historically that's the way to do it. Do it like Gornick did. Davy White as Derek McInnes. So they'll want to, they might see us as a really exciting opponent, or they'll be thinking, well, we've Real Betis, Fiorentina, didn't it? It was really tough the way we went out to the two of them. Let's just get us through the Europa League. It's time for us to move on. They might do like us against Ajax Athens or did Levski Sofia back in the 90s after we were a goal from the final in 92-93 from the Champions League, and just think, oh, we're due to get there. We're due to move on. We're better than this, and get a bit ahead of themselves. I would like it if this is the night that Derek McInnes properly arrives, but I say the emphasis seems to be Europe, not. The emphasis seems to be domestic football, not Europe, but I think we're more likely to go with a 4-4-2. He's maybe going to get the Daisuke Yokota involved in this as well. I think if Yokota is not deemed match sharp enough or involved enough so far, I think he might go with a 4-4-2 that's going to drop one of Dragojevic or Devlin. Dan Neil, I would imagine, will start. I'd just do the same. Sterling, Fernandes, Macania and Romans as your back four, Ivor Pander in goals. It would be Dan Neil and one of Dragojevic or Devlin, probably Devlin. But you'd have Asgard on the kind of left-hand side, maybe floating into 10 as well. And you'd have Finlay Curtis on the other side with Shankland and Chermiti up front, but I think he's got to play both of them. Chermiti and Shankland can both do stuff outside the box as well. They can both get going. Chermiti could be the target man, so can Shankland. Shankland can go 10 as well. They've got a flexibility there, which again is another reason this on Friday night, the criticism was we don't have end in the wings, we don't have enough players coming on. Graham Souness has said this as well. You've got to get football people in it to decide the recruitment. You don't need to be a football person just to know that we need. If there's players that are required, they're required. And the manager will tell you. Derek McInnes will tell you what we need. I feel as if we had the players there to provide it. It's become a very an untrustworthy. I don't trust that the amount of people suddenly, we didn't have anything doing the wings. It's become a kind of buzzword, an excuse almost. I don't know, like Celtic fans shouting anti-football when we got to the 2007-2008 UEFA Cup final. It doesn't ring true at all for me. There was plenty there. Asgard, we saw his ability. We've got plenty coming from other areas as well of the park to be creative enough to beat Dundee United at Tannadice. It was a shit result. I think we should acknowledge it as such. A really disappointing performance. Things have got to change. We've got to change the pattern, and that was a real chance to change the pattern of being unable to win our opening game of the season. And if we take it badly enough, if we see it's been a bad enough moment, I think that's when you get the energy to refocus and push on, and it's something we recover from. We're watching all the end of season Rangers lift the title again videos. It'll start, imagine we didn't think it was going to be like this when we drew 1-1 with Dundee United at Tannadice. I know. But I think we're probably more, I would go 4-3-3 as I say tomorrow night, but we're more likely to go 4-4-2 with Dan Neil, Cammy Devlin, Delo Asgard and Finlay Curtis as the four, and Shankland and Chermiti up front. The score prediction, I'm going to go one each again, but that's been very, very optimistic. This will go really badly wrong. In the same way, this whole pod, my whole tone here, sorry folks, I'm not proud of it, but it's like the same way the Billy Boys comes out whenever Rangers look like we're about to sicken the happiness of somebody who's been taunting us up till very recently. So too do I find that I keep my kind of powder too dry. It could become a bit kind of acrid, a bit too damp or too dry, whatever. It comes out all wrong. I get the poison out too violently when the moment of relief arrives. Last season, the hunting of Russell Martin, the hunting of him and the reasons behind it, and the hunting of James Tavernier, which turned to an onslaught of hypocrisy when Tav finally, in the end, did get a bit precious and selfish. All that just came out over the last few days, I think, as Derek McInnes received the kind of patience and sage kind of contextualising forgiveness, which was there for no one last season. I felt, let's just let's just hope it doesn't go beyond my infantile gripes, because Bialystok's a place infamous for its lack of mercy, for its depravity, its evil. We'll all need to stick together to get the hell out of this, to get the hell out of Bialystok with something to build on next Thursday. I'll talk to you very, very briefly after the game, troops. Rafał Lemkin loyal.